Hey, this is Gary with Today for Tomorrow, and I'm in Jupiter Farms, Florida with Jen Reelitz and Food Forest DIY. Jen and I connected online, and she was kind enough to invite me to her beautiful property. Let's check it out.
Hey guys, so glad to have you join us today. I've been doing Food Forest for 3 to 5 years, just kind of being self-taught, mainly on YouTube. It's a great place to learn. And so I began to implement those ideas that I learned on my property here. And one of the most important staples in any food forest is pigeon pea. I talk a lot about staple crops because really if you want to feed people, there are 4 kinds of staple crops in the tropics. Tropical potatoes, bananas, beans, and greens that are high in protein. And by far the easiest bean to grow here is called pigeon pea or gandules. You can use pigeon pea green like edamame or brown like lentils. These are probably a little bit far gone because they should have been picked a long time ago. But I had so many that we could not harvest all of them. You can see almost this whole wall behind me up to about 15 feet tall is pigeon pea. Pigeon pea also helps create a really happy microclimate. I like to show people the difference between the food forest area kind of and the orchard over here. In an orchard or traditional agriculture, you're spacing fruit trees about 10 feet apart and growing in rows, but all of the space in between the trees is not well utilized. But in a food forest, you're using all the space around the trees to produce potatoes, bananas, beans, greens that are high in protein. Another element of food forest is layers, right? And here we have a jackfruit tree that just produced beautiful big jackfruit. But we also have yard-long beans that are super happy, doing really well. I just harvested tons of beans off this tree yesterday. And so it's such an interesting symbiotic relationship where the beans are fixing nitrogen for the tree, making the tree really happy, and the beans are using the tree as a trellis. So if you don't have a trellis, but you have things that need to vine, use your trees and bushes as a living trellis. Over here we have a really important perennial. It's called Ibeca or edible hibiscus. These leaves, when they're in full production, can get huge. Like I use them for lettuce wraps. They have a really good flavor quality. So if you're looking for a raw green, I highly recommend this edible hibiscus, sometimes called Ibeca. Cranberry hibiscus is one of my absolute favorites. There's so many uses for it. You can throw it in salad, you can throw it in tea. I have some livestock and my little coon pigs love cranberry hibiscus. It's their favorite treat. It's so easy to propagate from a cutting, and honestly, if you want to create a food forest for free or cheap, you've really got to get knowledgeable about what plants can grow from a cutting. A good book would be Free Plants for Everyone by David the Good Guide to Plant Propagation. You can propagate cranberry hibiscus, hog plum, red mombin, chaya, katuk, longevity spinach, Cuban oregano, Ibeca. There are literally so many plants that you can propagate from a cutting. So one of the best things you could do is find people who are doing food forest in your local area and become friends. Ask for a food forest tour, ask for some cuttings and seeds, begin to understand what plants you already have in your yard that could be propagated from a cutting. For example, if you've got a beautiful native knockout rose bush or fire spike or dombeya, there are so many beautiful flowers and food forest plants that you can propagate easily and then use those plants to trade for plants you don't have yet. So one of the most important greens that's high in protein is chaya. There are hunger researchers who think that chaya could help solve world hunger because one serving of chaya leaves has as much protein as an egg. It has twice the iron of spinach. It's loaded with vitamin A and vitamin C. Now there are 2 varieties of chaya, so I think it's really important to differentiate between the 2. There's this one that we call broadleaf chaya, and there's this other one with smaller leaves that have a little bit of a different shape. I think for vegetative mass, the broadleaf chaya definitely wins. You've got to pick 5 or 6 of these leaves to equal one of these. Chaya is an incredible substitute in cooking. I use it when I'm making spinach artichoke dip, any kind of soup or stew, pasta, rice, literally any way that you would use a cooked green, you can substitute Chaya. Of course, if you grew it in your yard, it's free. You know, there were no chemicals or pesticides sprayed on it, and it's really high in protein. So especially if you're trying to eat vegan or you know, just eat clean, this is a great protein source. So look into Chaya.
Beautiful.
And this is my southern exposure. It's really important to try to plant your tallest trees on the north side because you get your best sun on the south side. So I've reserved my south side for the plants that really love sun and produce best in sun. For me, those would be yucca, cassava. I think that yucca is the #1 tropical staple crop worldwide. If you look throughout the whole equatorial zone at staple crops, yucca or cassava, I'm pulling about 15 to 20 pounds of tropical potatoes per plant. So if you had 20 plants at 20 pounds, you could have hundreds of pounds of yucca in the ground. Yucca is so versatile. I use it to make yucca fries, yucca con mojo with garlic aioli, a cassava cake in the Philippines. It's kind of like a tres leche with a custard top. Yucca is one of the only things we can grow here that could be a flour substitute, right? How many things these days are made with cassava flour? And the leaves are edible when cooked. They make kind of like a nice, honestly, like a green mash to go with pasta, to go with rice. But this entire area is basically yucca, mulberry, nopales, prickly pear cactus. So one of the amazing things about mulberry is that every time you prune it back, it'll set fruit. And so I'm getting fruit at least 2 to 3 times a year. Mulberry is so delicious. It's kind of like a blackberry, but sweeter, healthier for you, has more antioxidants, and again, you can get multiple harvests a year. In addition to that, these mulberry tips are edible, and you can just cut them off, throw them in a stir fry. They taste really excellent. They're a little bit tart, but really crisp and refreshing. And so mulberry is absolutely one of my favorite things to grow, and you can propagate mulberry from a cutting. So once you have one really strong tree, you can make a lot more. I've got one tree that I've probably made 50 trees from. My favorite is dwarf Thai, because a lot of your mulberry varieties want to get huge, 60 feet tall. They have leaves as big as your face. I want to keep mulberries the size of a bush so they're easy to harvest and they stay under control. Dwarf varieties are much easier to control, so I recommend them. So behind me is a papaya that's in its 2nd year of production. I think papaya is such an amazing fruit because in a very small space, it can produce hundreds of pounds of fruit. A lot of you might be accustomed with the orange variety, but there's also a red and a yellow that are both really sweet. You can also use papaya green as a vegetable. In Asia, they use it, they make pickled papaya that is fantastic. You can throw it in soups and stews. So use it as a fruit, use it as a vegetable. It's pretty versatile. One of my other favorite perennial vegetables is nopales or prickly pear cactus. Most folks throughout Latin America know exactly how to use this. If you've eaten at a Mexican restaurant, you've probably had it before. It would taste kind of like a bell pepper with a hint of lemon. So imagine free bell pepper for the rest of your life, pest resistant, drought tolerant. It will grow. You could neglect it for years. It would continue to grow. These new pads are useful as a vegetable. You can literally chop them up, throw them in soups, stews, chili, omelets, however you use a bell pepper in cooking, and it's free. So this is a banana circle with multiple varieties of bananas. We've got one really tall lacatan producing fruit. This is a banana circle that's only been here for about 6 to 9 months. I'm totally convinced that banana circles are the way to go. I planted bananas out in the food forest, put a little mulch around them, but didn't give them a lot of love, and they didn't give me any fruit. So I began to build banana circles, which is digging a pit that's about 6 feet long by 3 feet wide by 3 feet deep. Imagine digging a bathtub, filling it with logs, leaves, manure, kitchen scraps, any organic material you can find. And as you're filling the pit, having a hose and constantly soaking it in water. We want all of that organic material to hold water. Because if there's two things that bananas need, they need a ton of organic material and a ton of water. So the goal of the pit is to hold both. This can become your new kitchen scrap compost pile. Just toss it in as you have it. Eggshells, coffee grinds, banana peels, anything you have that will feed these plants. And I promise you, if you take care of them, they will take care of you. I've had bananas in a circle produce so many more fruit and pups than bananas just left on their own. So this is a banana circle that's been here for about 3 to 4 months. And again, we dug a pit, we filled it with organic material, and these bananas are super happy. You might notice there's yucca growing in the banana circle. It's not because I planted it here. It was just a volunteer from the compost pile. So you never know what will happen when you throw it all in a pile, and it's all pretty happy. All right, so a really important distinction when it comes to banana pups is not every banana pup is of the same type, and they have different uses. There's two kinds of banana pups. There are sword suckers and there are water suckers. The way you can tell is by the leaf shape, and they have different uses. So your sword sucker is going to grow into a banana tree that will produce a huge rack of 100 fruit that's high quality. Your water sucker will grow into a big banana tree that will produce a small rack of a few bananas that are lower quality. So your water sucker is useful for propagation, and your sword sucker is useful for fruit. I allow my sword suckers to develop into large trees, and I dig my water suckers out to propagate and start a new banana stand. Okay. So this is a water sucker. You can see this kind of wide leaf. Actually, it's got paint on it. I can show you a different one. And this is a sword sucker. You see it's got like a long, narrow leaf. So that's how you know it's a sword sucker. Again, over here, even on the more mature pups, you can tell by looking at the smallest leaves on the bottom. Are they wide or are they narrow? If they're narrow, they're a sword sucker. If they're wide, they're a water sucker. You can see down here, this guy has a wide leaf, right? This guy has a wide leaf. He's a water sucker. Behind him, he's also got wide leaves, but the leaves that are smallest on the bottom are long and narrow because he's a sword sucker. Guys, thank you so much for visiting today. I am so excited about Food Forest because when you think about why we need to do this, in 1945, 50% of Americans were growing food, and they were growing 50% of all the food in the United States in backyard gardens. That generation had knowledge, skills, resilience, and they were at least partially self-sufficient. Also think back to the 1940s, how much less cancer, obesity, all the health problems that plague us today, I think a lot of it is because we stopped eating real food a long time ago. Today, Americans grow 0.1% of their own food. It hasn't always been this way. It doesn't have to be this way. I've changed it for my family. You can change it for yours. Go grow something.